My name is Everett Dorman. I was fired the day I returned from my mother's funeral. 3 days I took off with written approval. They erased the proof, locked me out, and replaced me like I never mattered. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. But I didn't stay silent. I stood up, spoke out, and made sure the truth had a voice, mine. Please, listen to the full story, every quiet moment, every tear, every word they didn't want me to say. Then tell me honestly, did I do the right thing by speaking out? Would you have done the same? Leave a comment. I need to know I wasn't wrong to choose my dignity. It was a Monday, cold and gray, the kind of morning that seeps into your bones before you even step outside. You know the kind, where even the sky feels like it's holding something back. I remember standing in my driveway, keys in hand, staring at the frost lining my windshield. I had just buried my mother 2 days earlier, and I was still wearing the shoes from the funeral. They pinched a little. Funny what details your mind clings to. I'd taken 3 days off. Nothing outrageous. Just enough to fly down to Kentucky, stand beside my sister while we laid Mom to rest, and then come back to Minneapolis before the week started. I'd cleared it all in advance with Lynette, emails, texts, even a verbal of course, take what you need. She'd said it with that half-tilted smile of hers, the one that always felt a little too polished to be real. When I walked into the North Grove logistics office that morning, something was off. Normally, I get at least a few head nods, maybe a quick, welcome back, Everett. But not this time. Just silent glances over cubicle walls, eyes that darted away as soon as I met them. I told myself people were busy. Monday mornings are rough. Maybe they didn't know yet. The office lights felt too bright. The air too still. Even the hum of the coffee machine seemed distant. I walked past the break room, empty. Not even Susan from accounting, who was usually there microwaving oatmeal before 9. When I got to my desk, I sat down slowly, still half expecting an email or a sticky note, some acknowledgement of the days I'd missed. But my computer wouldn't log me in. Password denied. I tried again. Nothing. The screen flashed red and asked me to contact IT. I stood up, walked down the hall to the tech office. Mark, the junior tech guy, looked up like he'd seen a ghost. Hey, Mark, I said, trying to keep it casual. Can't get into my system. Think it reset over the weekend. He hesitated, fingers hovering above his keyboard. Yeah, maybe. But I think Lynette wanted to speak with you first. She's in her office. That was strange. IT usually handled this stuff without involving upper management. But I nodded, thanked him, and turned toward the corner office. My pulse had started to climb without me realizing. Her door was closed, but the blinds were tilted open just enough for her to see me approach. She motioned for me to come in. Morning, Everett, she said. Her tone was smooth, almost cheerful, but her eyes were steel cold. Hey, Lynette, I replied. IT said you needed to talk to me? She gestured to the chair across from her desk. I sat down slowly. The room was pristine, overly so, like no one had touched anything all weekend. Not a pen out of place. I hope the funeral went okay, she said. I nodded. As well as it could. It was good to be with family. She smiled tightly. Family matters. Absolutely. There was a pause. A long one. Then she leaned forward slightly. Everett, we've noticed some inconsistencies in your attendance reporting from last week. I blinked. What do you mean? Well, you were marked as absent without formal notification. There wasn't a leave request on file in the system. My eyebrows furrowed. I emailed you, and you responded. You said, take what you need. I have it right here. I started reaching for my phone. Lynette held up a hand, stopping me gently but firmly. I understand you may feel you had approval, but unless it's logged officially in HR system, our policy views it differently. I sat back in my chair, the weight of her words settling over me like wet cement. My mouth opened, then closed again. She wasn't just brushing past this, she was building something, laying the groundwork. Lynette, I said quietly, we've worked together for nearly 8 years. I've never once taken unapproved leave. I know, she said quickly. You've always been reliable. But systems are systems. We have to be consistent. There was that word again, consistent. It was always the word they used right before pulling the rug out from under you. She looked me in the eye and said almost gently, "You disappeared, Everett. And in this company, absence comes at a cost." I stared at her, just stared, because in that moment I realized something had already been decided, long before I even walked through that door. I didn't say anything, didn't ask what that cost was, because I think, deep down I already knew. The silence between us stretched long and thin, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was sitting across from a stranger. They called me down to HR less than an hour after that meeting with Lynette. No warning, no email, just a short, clipped message from her assistant. HR needs to see you. Conference room C. No subject line. No signature. Just that. The room was small and windowless, with those beige walls that looked like they'd been stained by too many tense conversations. Karen from HR sat across from me, hands folded neatly on the table, eyes flicking to her screen and back again like she didn't want to make this personal. Like she was reading a script. "Everett," she began, "we've reviewed the circumstances of your absence last week, and unfortunately, we have to proceed with termination for failure to follow attendance protocols." I stared at her. My ears rang. For a second, I thought maybe she was joking, that this was some kind of bureaucratic mix-up they'd clear up in a minute. But Karen didn't flinch. "I emailed Lynette directly," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She approved it. Told me to take the time I needed. I can show you the thread right now." I reached into my jacket pocket for my phone, pulled it up, found the email within seconds. Karen leaned forward, adjusted her glasses, and took a look. Her eyes narrowed, but not in a curious way, in a defensive, almost rehearsed way. "That's strange," she murmured. "There's no record of this in our system. It doesn't show up in Lynette's sent folder or the internal HR approval logs." My stomach turned. "What are you saying?" I asked. She looked down at her screen, then back at me. "I'm saying we can't verify the approval. And without formal documentation logged through our channels, we have no basis to classify your absence as excused." That's when it hit me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was constructed. Carefully, maybe even over time. The approval was real, I knew it was. But the fact that it had vanished from a system? That wasn't an accident. "Maybe you should talk to Lynette again," I said, voice colder now. "She's the one who gave me the green light." Karen gave me that HR smile, the one that's technically polite but void of anything human. "I'm afraid our decision is final." I left the building in a daze. The wind outside felt sharper than it had that morning. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, just staring at the steering wheel. I should have been furious, but I wasn't, not yet. I was numb, stunned, like someone had pulled the floor out from under me and I hadn't hit the ground yet. It wasn't just the job. It was the way it had been done, the erasure, the precision of it, like they'd scrubbed me from the story completely, like I'd never mattered in the first place. That night, I ended up at Harbor Bean. It was a little coffee shop tucked between a print shop and a used bookstore. I used to meet industry folks there now and then just to talk logistics and drink too much dark roast. I don't know why I went there. Maybe I was hoping someone would still see me as real. The place was nearly empty. Late evening lull. I ordered a black coffee and took the corner table by the window. I was halfway through my first sip when I heard the chair across from me scrape the floor. "Didn't expect to see you here this late," said a voice I hadn't heard in years. I looked up. Wendell Trask, older than me by maybe 7 or 8 years, with a trimmed beard and those tired, smart eyes that always seemed to read more than you were willing to say. He used to be North Grove's senior operations advisor until he wasn't. One day, he just disappeared. Word around the office was he'd been pushed out for not adapting to new management. "Wendell," I said. "Been a long time." He nodded, pulling off his coat. I heard what happened. From someone still in the building. Of course he had. News like mine spreads quiet and fast. "You here to offer sympathy or wisdom?" I asked, half smiling. "Neither," he said, shrugging. "Just coffee." We sat in silence for a while. The kind that didn't need to be filled. Then he said, "I stayed quiet too long, Everett. It didn't save me. It just made it easier for them to erase me. I looked down at my cup. My hands weren't shaking, but I could feel the tension curled up inside them like a fist waiting for permission. What would you have done differently? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, document everything. Watch who checks in, who checks out. Don't speak too soon, but don't stay quiet forever. I nodded. As he stood to leave, he paused and looked at me. One question you'll need to ask yourself sooner or later, he said. Do you want your job back, or do you want your dignity back? That one sat with me all night. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table long after the coffee had gone cold. I hadn't really slept. Wendell's words kept replaying in my head like a scratched record. Do you want your job back, or do you want your dignity back? I didn't have an answer yet. What I did have was a gut feeling that something wasn't just unfair, it was orchestrated. So I started digging. I pulled up my personal laptop and scrolled through my old backups. I wasn't the kind of guy who saved everything, but I developed a habit of screenshotting important conversations, especially after seeing how people could twist words when it suited them. It took a little searching, but there it was, right there in the photo archive from last Tuesday. An image of Lynette's email reply. Understood, Everett. Take what you need. I'll let Karen know on your behalf. Family comes first. The timestamp was clear. The email header's intact. I stared at it for a long time, then saved it in 3 different folders and emailed copies to myself. I wasn't about to let that disappear too. I didn't know what to do with it yet, but I knew I couldn't just sit on it. Around noon, I decided to stop by the office. Not in any official capacity. I no longer had one. Just as someone trying to understand what the hell had happened to his own life. I parked in the same lot I'd used for over a decade. It felt strange walking toward the building knowing I didn't belong there anymore. Like a ghost visiting the house it used to live in. The lobby receptionist didn't make eye contact. That was new. I scanned my badge at the elevator bank, half out of habit. The red light blinked back at me. Denied. Then a security guard I recognized, Miguel, younger guy, friendly before, stepped toward me. Hey, Everett, he said, shifting awkwardly. Sorry, man. I've been told you're not allowed upstairs. I blinked. I'm not here to work. I just need to talk to someone. He hesitated, looked at his radio, then said, I got direct instructions. Can't let you pass the lobby. It wasn't just a firing. I'd been erased. I turned to leave, but not before glancing toward the elevator again. That hallway used to feel like home. Now it looked like another closed door. On my way out, I passed a group of employees I didn't recognize. New faces, new names. One of them had a badge hanging from her neck that read Assistant Operations Manager. That was my old title. Later that afternoon, I called a former legal contact I'd worked with during a vendor dispute years back. Told him the basics. Asked whether a company could wipe internal records of email exchanges. He was careful with his words, but he said enough. It's possible, he told me. Not legal in most cases, but if they restructured the mail server or if someone manually deleted entries. Well, let's just say things can go missing when convenient. And if I have a screenshot of the email? He paused. That could help. But if they scrub the official logs, you're looking at a messy uphill climb. They may count on you not having the energy to fight it. That last part landed hard. I ended the call and just sat there, staring out the window. The afternoon sun was starting to sink, casting a dull glow over the quiet street. I felt like I was watching my career from outside a glass wall, knocking to be let back in. Around dusk, I went for a walk around Cedar Lake. I hadn't been there in years. The trees were mostly bare, but there was a kind of stillness that made it easier to breathe. My mother used to take me here when I was a kid. She liked the benches along the east side, said they made you feel like the world wasn't rushing past so fast. One of her favorite sayings popped into my head just then, so clearly I could have sworn she was walking next to me. Never stay where you're only needed, not wanted. I stood there for a long time, just listening to the wind. Something shifted in me. Not all at once, not like in the movies, but enough. When I got home, I opened an old folder on my desktop called Leaving Plans. I created it 2 years ago, Back when I first started feeling the ground shift beneath my feet at North Grove. I'd filled it with notes, ideas, contacts, half-finished resumes. I'd never had the nerve to do anything with it. Until now. I double-clicked the folder and didn't close it right away. I was staring at the old folder on my laptop when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Wendell. Meet me at Harbor Bean. Something you need to hear. No context. No explanation. Just like him. I didn't hesitate. 10 minutes later, I was back at the small coffee shop that was quickly becoming my war room. Wendell was already there, sitting in the far corner, 2 mugs in front of him. He didn't smile when he saw me, just nodded and pushed one of the mugs across the table. Straight black. Figured you hadn't switched. I haven't, I said, settling into the chair. What's going on? He leaned forward, lowering his voice. You remember Alex? Worked in IT. Young guy, sharp, always wore those goofy Star Wars socks. I nodded. Yeah, he was solid. He just left North Grove. Last week. Got offered a better position at a startup in St. Paul. But before he walked out, he sent me something. Wendell reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive. He placed it on the table like it was something radioactive. I'm not asking you to open it here, he said. But what's on there, it confirms everything. There was a directive. Internal. Lynette requested all digital correspondence between you and her regarding your leave be scrubbed. She flagged it as a sensitive internal matter and had IT isolate the exchange before removing it from system backups. I stared at him, my hand frozen halfway to the coffee. You're serious. As a heart attack, Wendell said. He didn't want to get directly involved, but he couldn't walk away knowing they buried the truth. I picked up the flash drive. It was small, barely weighed anything. But in my palm, it felt heavy as stone. So what do I do with this? I asked, though part of me already knew. That's your choice, Wendell said. You can let it go. Start over. Try to find peace somewhere else. Or, you make this public. Force them to face it. I looked out the window. The street outside was quiet, the late afternoon sun stretching long shadows across the sidewalk. Inside, the hum of the espresso machine and low jazz playing over the speakers made the moment feel too calm for what it was. I didn't ask for any of this, I said. I just wanted to bury my mother and come back to work. Wendell gave a sad smile. No one asks for betrayal. It finds you anyway. The next few days, I barely slept. I kept opening and closing the file on that flash drive. It was all there. Internal memos, deletion logs, even Lynette's flagged requests. It wasn't just unethical, it was deliberate. I thought about my next move constantly. Some nights, I'd draft a long post in my head, rehearsing how I'd tell the story without sounding bitter. Other nights, I talked myself out of it entirely. I knew the risks. If I went public, I might never work in corporate logistics again. Word gets around, and whistleblowers aren't always welcomed with open arms. There was no guarantee of justice, just the certainty of being noticed. But there was something deeper clawing at me. A part of me that couldn't bear the idea of just fading away, of letting the lies sit unchallenged. The older I got, the more I understood how silenced becomes rot. You don't feel it right away, but eventually it eats through you. One evening, I sat by the window with a notepad and started writing. Not a resignation letter, not a legal complaint, just the truth. I wrote about the day I found out. The hallway stairs, the locked computer, the erased email. I didn't embellish. I didn't editorialize. I just told it like it happened. I ended it with a single paragraph. I'm not writing this to burn bridges. I'm writing it because silence only protects those who know how to use it as a weapon. And I've spent too many years thinking dignity meant keeping my head down. Turns out it means looking people in the eye and telling the truth, even when your voice shakes. That night, before I turned out the lights, I sat on the edge of my bed and prayed. I hadn't prayed in a long time, not seriously, but I bowed my head anyway. God, I don't want revenge. I just don't want to leave this world thinking silence was safer. When I opened my eyes, the room was quiet. Nothing had changed, except me. I spent the better part of a week refining the words. I'd sit at my kitchen table, tapping out a few lines into a draft on LinkedIn, then backspacing half of them by morning. Every sentence felt like it carried more weight than it should, like I was walking a tightrope between bitterness and truth. I didn't want to sound angry. I didn't want sympathy. I just wanted to be heard, but I still hadn't hit post. It was a Thursday afternoon when I ran into Jeannie. She was walking out of the co-op downtown with a paper bag full of groceries, her auburn scarf blowing in the wind. I almost didn't recognize her. She'd cut her hair short, and there was something calmer about her now, like she'd stepped away from something heavy. "Everett," she said, doing a double take. "Jeannie," I nodded, managing a smile. "Been a while." She laughed softly, longer than it should have been. We stood awkwardly for a moment. Then she gestured toward the bench nearby. "You got time for coffee? I know a place not far." "Only if you're paying," I said. That made her laugh again. 20 minutes later, we were seated by the window at Harbor Bean, a place that was slowly turning into my unofficial headquarters. Jeannie looked older, but in a good way. More rooted. She'd always been one of the few voices of reason in our old department, smart, direct, and never one to chase approval. "I heard about what happened," she said after a sip. "I'm sorry. It wasn't right." I shrugged. "Doesn't seem like much of anything is these days." Jeannie set her cup down, folded her hands on the table. "People knew, Everett, about what Lynette was planning. They just didn't say it out loud." I looked at her, eyebrows raised. "You're serious?" She'd been trying to edge you out for months. After her promotion, she told a few of us in leadership that she wanted to bring in a more agile mindset. Code for younger, cheaper, easier to mold. I let out a bitter laugh. "So that's what loyalty gets you." She nodded slowly. Most of us didn't agree with it. But she had the ear of the board, and no one wanted to rock the boat. I leaned back in my chair, the sting of her words sinking in. It wasn't just her. It was a whole system of silence. "I've been thinking of posting something," I said, telling the truth. Not to lash out, just to set the record straight. "You should," Jeannie said. "And you're not alone." That night, she looped me into a group chat with Wendell and another former employee I barely knew. By morning, we were back at Harbor Bean, Jeannie, Wendell, and I, sitting at our usual table. This time, we weren't catching up. We were comparing notes. They told me something I hadn't seen coming. "A memo leaked," Jeannie said, sliding her phone across the table. "It was sent by Lynette to a director last quarter. She wrote, and I quote, 'We need to begin transitioning Everett Dorman out of core operations before Q2 ends. He's too set in old processes. I'll manage the exit quietly.'" I stared at the screen. There it was, in black and white. Her words, her plan, written months before I ever took that leave. "How did you get this?" I asked. "Forwarded by mistake to someone in payroll," she said. "He thought it was shady and sent it to me before he left." I exhaled slowly, my hand resting over the table. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't overreacting. I'd been targeted. All the pieces lined up, the cold behavior, the erased emails, the convenient timing. It wasn't just neglect. It was intentional. "You post your story," Wendell said, "and we'll share ours too. People need to know this isn't just one bad incident. It's a pattern." I sat there, looking at the two of them. I'd never felt more seen than I did in that moment, and more certain of what I needed to do. That night, I opened my LinkedIn draft again. My fingers moved without hesitation. I didn't write with anger. I didn't use big dramatic words. I just told the story. How I'd taken time off to bury my mother, with written approval. How I came back to find my system access revoked. How I'd been terminated for an unapproved absence that had, in fact, been approved, and then deleted. I attached the screenshot of the original email. I attached the memo Jeannie had shared. And I ended it like this. "I'm not here to accuse or shame. I'm here to say that silence protects the wrong people. And after 22 years of loyal work, I refuse to leave quietly just because someone more powerful decided I should. If this has happened to you too, know this. You're not crazy. And you're not alone." Then, without fanfare, I hit post. I didn't expect much to happen. I figured maybe a few former coworkers would read my post, maybe a couple of strangers would offer a word of encouragement. I thought it might sit on my profile like a pebble dropped into a pond, small ripple, then quiet again. But by the next morning, the post had taken on a life of its own. It wasn't viral in the flashy national news kind of way. You wouldn't see it on CNN. But in my corner of the world, the regional logistics and operations network around Minnesota, it hit like a jolt through a power line. People shared it, commented, messaged me privately to say things they'd never said before. I was pushed out the same way. I thought I was the only one. They made it look like a restructure, but it was a purge. I'm glad someone finally said it. It was like I'd cracked open a door that had been nailed shut for years, and suddenly the air was pouring in. Some of the names I recognized, folks I'd worked with in passing. Others were from nearby companies, people who'd crossed paths with North Grove at one point or another. A few had left quietly, no farewells, just vanished. Now they were finding their voices again. Then came the email from North Grove. It arrived that evening. Subject line: confidentiality, concern regarding public post. The body was all legalese, phrases like misuse of proprietary communication, potential defamation, and company policy violation. They asked, politely but firmly, that I remove the post for the sake of preserving the integrity of the company and avoiding escalation. I read it twice, then once more just to be sure. Then I closed my laptop, took a breath, and poured myself a glass of water. No whiskey, no coffee, just water. I wanted my head clear. I opened a reply window. I appreciate your concern, I typed. However, everything I shared was factual and supported by documentation that I legally possess. I will not be removing the post. I hit send. Not long after, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, but the same number called again a few minutes later. This time I picked up. Everett, this is Daniel Yates. I'm on the board at North Grove. His voice was calm, smooth. The kind of voice you associate with country clubs and quarterly earnings calls. I read your post, he continued. I can't speak for the company's position right now, but I think it's safe to say you've been heard. That wasn't the goal, I replied, keeping my voice steady. No, I didn't post it to be heard. I posted it because it was the truth. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "You've made your point. Let's not escalate this further." I looked out my kitchen window. The backyard was dark, motionless. Not even the wind stirred. I didn't make a point, I said slowly. I told the truth. What you do with it is up to you. There was silence on the other end. Then a clipped, understood. The line went dead. I stood there a long while after, just breathing. Not angry, not relieved, just still. An hour later, Wendell called. I saw the post, he said, his voice low and tight. Saw the comments. I saw what you told that board member too. Yeah. You just did what most of us couldn't. I didn't say anything. There wasn't much to add. That moment didn't need words. The next morning, I got an email from someone who still worked in North Grove's finance department. No subject line. No body text. Just a forwarded message. An internal memo from the executive committee. It read, "In light of recent events and concerns raised both internally and externally, we are initiating a formal review of VP Harrow's conduct and managerial decisions over the past 2 quarters. Further steps will be discussed in next week's ethics and compliance meeting." I stared at the screen. No applause. No spotlight. Just the quiet beginning of accountability. The invitation came on a Tuesday morning. An oddly polite email wrapped in legal distance. Mr. Dorman, the board would like to extend a request for a private discussion regarding recent matters. Please join us at our off-site meeting suite this Thursday at 10 a.m. No greeting. No signature. Just enough formality to imply importance, but not enough sincerity to feel human. I read it twice, then closed the laptop without replying. I'd be there. They knew I would. That kind of invitation isn't really optional. The building was unfamiliar, one of those short-term office rentals tucked between a dental supply company and a frozen yogurt shop. It smelled sterile and temporary, like lemon polish trying to cover up something rotten underneath. A young assistant with a headset led me through a glass corridor and into a room that felt too bright. Frosted windows, neutral art on the walls, the kind of place built for polite confrontation. Lynette was already there. She stood when I entered, hands folded neatly in front of her like a politician bracing for a camera flash. Her blazer was navy, pressed to perfection. A silver pin glinted near the collar, some corporate emblem I didn't recognize. She looked ready for a magazine shoot, not a reckoning. "Everett," she said with a controlled smile. "Thank you for coming." I nodded. Didn't shake her hand. Just took the empty chair opposite her and waited. 3 board members sat nearby, Daniel Yates, who'd called me after the post went live, and 2 others I didn't know. One was a woman with short gray hair and the sort of sharp, observant gaze that didn't miss much. No one reached for coffee. No one spoke casually. This wasn't a conversation. It was a moment. Lynette broke the silence. "I want to start by saying that I never intended for things to escalate the way they have." I kept my expression flat. "This was never personal," she continued. "There was a breakdown in communication. I truly believed you'd stepped away without completing the proper HR procedures. And with so much happening internally, I had to make a decision." "You thought I abandoned my post," I said, my voice quiet but steady. She hesitated. "Yes. And looking back, I can see how that assumption may have been premature." I reached into the inside pocket of my coat and slowly pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I laid it on the table between us, unfolded it, and read aloud. "Take what you need," I began, eyes still on the page. "I'll let HR know on your behalf." Dated March 14th. Signed Lynette Harrow. I let the words hang in the air. I didn't slam the paper down. I didn't raise my voice. I just placed the truth where it belonged, right in front of her. No one said a word. Even the soft hum of the ceiling vent seemed to hold its breath. I looked up and met her eyes. She didn't flinch, but something in her gaze shifted, just slightly. A crack in the armor. "You didn't just cost me a job," I said. "You cost me peace in my final days with my mother." I sat beside her, knowing you might pull the rug out at any moment. I buried her carrying fear in one hand and shame in the other. "And I won't let anyone do that to me again." Her mouth opened, just slightly, like she wanted to say something. But nothing came out. It was Daniel who finally spoke. "As of this morning," he said, clearing his throat, "Ms. Harrow has submitted her resignation. Effective immediately." The other woman nodded. This decision was hers. But it aligns with the board's interest in moving forward with integrity. They didn't use words like responsibility, ethics, or misconduct. They didn't have to. The quiet in the room said everything those corporate syllables couldn't. I didn't wait for more. I stood, gave a short nod, and turned to go. Just before the door clicked shut behind me, I heard a voice, soft, female, from the table. "You did it with more grace than any of us could." I didn't look back, but I heard it. And it stayed with me all the way to the parking lot. I didn't feel triumphant on the drive home. There was no adrenaline, no fire, just a sense of stillness. The kind that follows a long, hard storm. Without thinking, I turned down 26th and pulled into the Harbor Bean parking lot. The coffee shop was quiet, late morning lull, light spilling in through the big front windows. And there they were, Jeannie and Wendell, already at our usual table, both looking up as I walked in. No cheers, no raised hands, just a knowing look, a silent welcome, and a seat waiting for me. I sat down. No one said a word for a long time, and that was fine. There was no celebration, no back-patting, no toasts, just peace. A month passed, maybe a little more. Enough time for the noise to settle and the dust to clear. Lynette was gone, not just from North Grove, but from the industry altogether. Her LinkedIn profile vanished, and her name stopped appearing on press releases or conference rosters. No formal announcement, no farewell memo, no curated goodbye. Just erased. The same way she tried to erase me. I never got an apology, not officially. But the company's actions spoke louder than any statement could have. Within weeks, new protocols were quietly rolled out, formalized bereavement leave procedures, system-wide audit trails for manager approvals, even stricter protections on internal communication. They didn't say it was because of me. They didn't have to. Some folks might have called it justice. But for me, it just felt like truth settling into its rightful place. I didn't go looking for another job right away. I wasn't interested in another desk, another title, another set of hands pretending to be a handshake while holding a knife behind their back. What I did do was start saying yes to smaller things. A friend of mine, a former junior analyst from North Grove, had recently launched a supply chain startup and asked if I'd consider advising. Nothing full-time, just 3 days a week, mostly remote. I took the offer not because I needed the work, but because it felt like something real, something clean. I had my mornings back. I had room to think. I could sit on the porch with a mug of coffee that didn't taste like office resentment. I didn't dread Mondays. I didn't wake up checking my phone for passive-aggressive calendar invites. And on Thursdays, I started visiting my mother's grave. Just me and a fresh bouquet. No rush, no guilt, no pretending I was on a break from some spreadsheet hell. I could sit with her in silence and not feel like I was being measured for productivity. One of those mornings, I thought back to the night I walked around Cedar Lake, when everything still felt raw and uncertain, when all I could manage was a whispered prayer. I don't need revenge. I need peace. And somehow, that peace had come. Not in a flash. Not all at once. But in the slow, honest rebuilding of a life where I no longer had to trade my dignity for a paycheck. It's funny how the world tries to make you believe silence is the safer path. That if you just keep your head down, things will pass, settle, resolve on their own. But I learned something hard and clear this past year. Silence isn't safety. It's surrender. Jeannie texted me not long ago. I was in the middle of organizing a workshop for the startup team. Something light, about building ethical processes without red tape. She sent one sentence. They're hosting a culture reform workshop at North Grove. Guess who they quoted in the intro slide? You. I stared at the message and let out a quiet laugh. Not smug. Just surprised. I never imagined being the face of anything, much less a company's half-hearted attempt at redemption. But there it was. Proof that even in a system built to ignore you, the truth finds cracks to seep through. Later that day, I pulled out a small notebook I kept in my desk drawer. I don't write it often, but now and then, I need to get something out of my head and into ink. I wrote, "The cost of silence is your soul, and I'm done paying." Then I closed the book, leaned back, and looked out the window. I lost a job, but I found myself again, and that was enough. Before we end this story, I just want to say this. Sometimes it's not about winning. It's about not losing yourself when everything around you starts to fall apart. We all reach a point where staying silent costs more than speaking up. I reached mine. And maybe, just maybe, you felt that too. Have you ever been pushed to a line you didn't know you had until someone crossed it? If this story touched something in you, I hope you'll stay with me for the ones to come. Because these quiet, honest moments, we don't go through them alone. We carry them together.